What we done started. Look at what we done started. This the people party. Peace and love, party people. This is Talib Kweli, the BKMC, the MCEO. You are checking out the world's best podcast, The People's Party. As always and as usual, I got my favorite co-host in the place to be, Jasmin Leigh. What's up, Jasmin?
Woo! I got to clap for myself today. We're a little skimp in the studio. You know what? I'm feeling good, and it's crazy. People always think we're in separate rooms, and we're not. And today we're actually in separate rooms. So
yes, well, we have practice on Zoom from the pandemic, and well, you know, we're still in the throes of it a little bit, but we are live from New York City and Los Angeles and the city of brotherly and sisterly love, Philadelphia. We're going live from Philadelphia today because today's guest is in Philadelphia, and she is a very, very important and influential figure in American poetry and in my life in particular. She is a wordsmith, a poet, an author, a professor, an activist, and one of the leading figures of the Black arts movement. She was very influential in the civil rights movement and a supporter of the National Black United Front. Her writing appeared in the legendary periodicals like The Liberator and Negro Digest, and she has penned more than a dozen books of poetry, short stories, and essays. Her debut collection of poetry, Homecoming, it changed the game, and We Are Bad People pushed the envelope of her art form. She is a PEN Award winner, a National Education Association Award winner, a National Endowment for the Arts Fellowship Award winner. She's won American Book Awards, Community Service Awards. If I listed all the awards that she won, we would have no time to interview her. But her cultural currency and what she has given us as a culture is more important than any of those awards. It just scratches the surface when we talk about the awards. Ladies and gentlemen, give it up for a woman I respect down to the marrow of my bones. Sonia Sanchez, the professor, my sister, is in the place to be on People's Party. How are you?
Thank you, my dear brother. It's so good seeing you.
Oh, it's beautiful seeing you. Now, my mother actually put me in touch with you because you and my mother have become good friends over the years, and y'all travel together and do a lot of things. So I want to salute Dr. Brenda Green for making sure that we stay in contact. And I also want to thank you for being on my album, Everything Man. You just held up the vinyl for Eardrum.
Yeah.
For people who don't know, Sonia Sanchez is the author and the performer of the opening poem of this album. And you have a poem. I have an album called Liberation with Madlib, and I'm doing Liberation 2. So your poem Liberation, I wanted to talk to you about maybe doing something with that for this newer album. And I appreciate you for that. I want to thank Morani for helping us out today. And Morani and your sons, Mungu and Morani, they introduced you to hip hop. And there's a quote that you said in an interview with Visionary Project. And you said, you think you don't have to understand it, or you think you don't need to understand it. And that's why you weren't understanding it. So can you speak to how they introduced you to hip hop and what hip hop means to you?
That's right. I mean, but what I do know, my sister, my brothers, and what you must know, that it is a continuation. You know, it is a beautiful thing. It is something that we know, that when I watch the young rappers come in, people complain bitterly. And I mean, and I don't change, what goes on. I used to come in and Mungu and Morani had it on so loud, I could hear it in the driveway outside. I come in tired from teaching, right? They were home and there's loud music. And I came in to put some water on for some tea to relax. And I said, and I quote, "Oh my God," I said, I can't even hear what they're saying. And I would never forget the look in their face. And, Mom, you come from New York City. We used to always ask you to repeat what you said because you spoke so fast. They got me. And I stopped and looked. It was so true, because I said, why are they asking me to say that again? Right. Because we spoke very fast in New York City. Right. And they were reminding me, and they set me down. We used to have a program on Sundays about if something happened during the week. I would say we're going to do 2 hours on, this book, on love, or you name it, whatever. And I said, we're going to do this thing on music. And so they were so happy. So I started out, I started out with Mozart.
Okay.
Yeah, okay. You got to hear that.
Take it all the way back.
That's right, But my children set me down. And then they started, and they were so smart. You know what I mean? They started with the people that they knew I knew. whatever, etc. And Stevie Wonder, whatever. And then they went to rap, and then I tightened up, and they turned and said to me, "Mom, listen to this the way you listen to all your friends talk."
Right. That's it right there.
One of my friends had to say that to me. I'm moved from New York to the South, and I always would talk about how crappy Southern music was. And one of my friends was like, "Stop thinking about Southern music being bad and just listen to the words." And once I listened to the words, I'm like, "Oh, this is actually inspirational. It's not just all talking about the same thing." So sometimes, you have to listen to others so you can open up your ears and mind.
Oh, you have to do that, But it's also another thing I think that is interesting. What they taught me is that, at some point, you're older, you think you know more than the kids, than the children, right? And then what
Yes.
I did, I sat on that couch, and they began to play it again. And I said, "Oh my God, listen to this." And I started telling them what it was about. They said, "Mom, we know already." And I used to put the CDs in my Jeep, and I would play it. And then I get at the corner where the brothers on Broad Street were hanging out, and then I would put on a Mozart real fast. And they'd say, "Miss Sanchez, hi." They come over, and I pull over and say, "What's that?" And I would talk to them. Then I said, "But listen to this."
Yes.
And then I would have a rap coming through. So they would always be on the corner in the morning, and they would wave to me. And I said, "I'm listening to Coltrane this morning." But they taught me no resentment, because they were completely correct. You almost get arrogant, like, "I know music better than you know music,"
Right.
whatever. And I can tell you about this music. And my children literally took me under their wings, right? And they played every new thing they brought in. And I sat there and I cried sometimes listening. I said, I would have lost this. I would not have understood that these were our children coming behind us. I would have lost a whole generation if I had not listened to them, and I am so grateful to them always. And that's why
Yes.
I love
So am I.
Talib, so very much. And that whole group, because, I did something with Rakim, and that Casualties of War, I used to put that
Oh, that's a
on
good record.
every morning before
know
I
about
left the
that?
house. I put Casualties of War. Can you imagine? Because of that CD alone, they stopped showing the body bags. Remember,
Yeah.
you were too young. They should show the body bags coming home from war.
Right,
And
right.
then all of a sudden, when that
Vietnam.
CD hit, they stopped, because they knew it was teaching people something about war. At some particular
Right.
point.
Okay, so shout out to Amiri Baraka, rest in peace, and Ras Baraka, his son, and Audrey Lorde, and Maya Angelou, and Gwendolyn Brooks, who I just wrote a song based on, one of her poems. Hakeem Adabudi, who's very influential to me, Ishmael Reed, Nikki Giovanni, all these people, all these incredible people came out of the Black arts movement. Can you tell us about your involvement in the creation of the Black arts movement and its impact on the culture?
As we tried to at some point navigate what was happening in America, what was happening to families, what was happening to our communities, what was happening in the schools, what was happening all over. And we were trying to confront it at the same time, trying to raise our children, and trying also to answer the most important question that we began a discussion on: what does it mean to be human during the 1960s? My group of people, Baraka, Haki, Larry Neal, June Jordan, the poets out of Chicago, all these people who were coming along, we're looking at the world saying simply, we've got to begin to bring our own discussion, our own logic, our own way of looking at the world. And America said, who do you think you are? Don't you know you are Negroes? Don't you understand what being a Negro is, right? You follow orders, you do what we say, you go to the schools we want you to go, and you write the kind of poetry you want you to write, right? And all of a sudden we looked up, and two people, Coltrane and Malcolm, we began to listen to, and they began to teach us, and see, I know I teach English, but that ain't quite right. This is the real deal. And we began to listen to them. The irony of all that is that Coltrane and Malcolm were dead, by 65. And there we were with all that information, and there was no one there, really at some
Facilitated.
point, looking at it, recording it. And we didn't have the names. And a man by the name of, at that time, Leroy Jones, who was in the village, he said that he was at a book reading that Sunday, and someone came in and said Malcolm had been shot. And he then said at that point, I'm moving back uptown. I'm coming into Harlem. And he did. And he came out and he sent letters to all the writers saying, come help me continue the work that Malcolm began. And we came, my dear brother and sister, we came moving at some point with the pain that we were moving in, but with the idea that he and Larry Neal were talking about beginning something called Black Arts, having a place for us, having a place where we would begin to do a curriculum for students to come out during the summer, and come to our place and learn about themselves, learn mathematics, learn all these kinds of things. And that brownstone in Harlem, my dear brother, on Friday and Saturday nights, and sometimes Sunday, lines were around, not only around the block, but double, whatever. They were coming in to hear two things: the one-act plays that people were doing, the music that great musicians were doing, and the poetry that people were reading. It was in that place, in that building there in Harlem, that our dear sister Abbey Lincoln came in with her beautiful, beautiful short natural. Right? Because we didn't know what to do with our hair. We kind of let it grow out. And there it was. She came in and she did a piece on who will revere the Black woman. I will never, ever in my life forget that moment. There were at least about 80 or 100 Black women sitting there looking at her, not only admiring her, but listening to what she was saying. But in that room, you began to smell your history and your herstory. You began to smell what our ancestors, the females, had done. You began to smell something growing in your breast, in your womb, in your legs, in your toe jam, that this is something different happening here, that this is what we must do. And so we came there, we gathered there. I remember the sun began to set and she began to listen to questions. And we looked at that beautiful, beautiful Black woman who ended the session by singing. And we all said, that's the kind of Black woman I want to be. That is where and how I want to move as an artist, as a Black woman artist. And that was a joy there.
Can you talk to me about your experience growing up in Birmingham in 1934? And also, can you touch on your relationship with your mother and your grandmother and how losing them and the trauma from that led to your stuttering problem, which then led to your love of poetry?
I was indeed. My mother died giving birth to twins, and some years later I gave birth to twins. It was supposed to skip me, it skips a generation. And my grandmother came to my father's house and picked us up, my sister Patricia and myself, and took her to her house, to her home in Birmingham. And we lived there with them, with two cousins. We called them Auntie Ruth and Auntie Louise, because they were older cousins. That's a real Southern thing. And I was a child, who was always with a book and making them teach me, read the book to me. And finally, my grandmother said to Aunt Louise, teach that girl how to read, because she's always asking me to read. But my grandmother didn't know how to do that well, right? And they did. But I was also the child that went out in these little fancy clothes they put on you and came back in ragged. It was torn. My braids were out, whatever. But my sister, Pat, she went out looking like that. She came back in looking the same way, like as if she had not taken a breath outside. I mean, seriously, because my sister was a raving beauty. And that's how she came in. And my aunts would say, oh, look at Patricia. Look at her. She's so beautiful. Look, she comes back in. Look at Sonia. The dress is torn. The braids are out, and her face is dirty. And Mama would say, let the girl be. And I have that in a poem of mine, long prose poem. Let the girl be. She be all right. She gonna stumble on gentleness one of these days. I'm not too sure I have stumbled on gentleness, but I did stumble on something that was equally as important, and perhaps not the gentleness she was talking about, but the gentleness of our people, the gentleness of my family. I would play. I would run with the boys because they had such interesting games. They ran, they climbed, they jumped, whatever, and the girls would sit down and just be looking pretty, whatever. And I come in, and one day one of the brothers said, "I'm the leader." And I said, "No, you're not. No one said you're a leader." So they said, "Well, we have to figure out, how what we would do for the leader to be the leader." So I thought, oh, we ran in the house, came in the backyard door, and my sister and I had a bedroom, and there was a high window. I climbed up on the window. I said, "The person who jumps out this window," you got to hear that, "and slides down to the ground is the leader." And nobody did it, right? So I said, "I'll do it." However, as I jumped, I realized I had put too much pressure on it. It was too fast. And I slid down fast, and I did hurt my knees. They all went running, my sister included, calling the aunties and my grandmother. "Sonia jumped out the window on the trees." Mama came out. With all her wisdom, and she said, "You all right?" And she said, "Let's go change." And my aunties would say, "Make her stay inside. She's always out there running and jumping and whatever." And Mama turned around and looked and said, "Let the girl be." And I went out and I played some more. But I had that stutter. I had that tongue-tied kind of thing that happened after Mama died. I came into the house one day. My auntie sent me in to wake her up, and I used to wake her up by jumping on the bed, jumping over her, and going, "Bow, bow, get up, Mama," and now jump off the bed and run outside. And I did that. And as I ran outside, I turned back. Mama was still in bed, and I said to Auntie Ruth, I jumped on the bed, and Mama didn't move, and they went in and she was dead. She had died. Right, yeah. And then we never saw her again after that. And so I began this kind of slow thing where, I would not connect my sentences. I mean, it was a blow because this woman protected me. This woman let me just be. When the sisters would come on Saturday to cook, to snap the beans, I have a piece of that to Mama, to my grandmother. I would come in from outside and slide behind the couch and listen to them. And I put in the book, I heard the things that one of them, between the snaps of the beans, snap, snap, whatever.
Yeah.
Someone said, Brother John is beating his wife. And it would be a snap of the bean. And they said, and one of them kind of smiles. "I guess we have to go tell Sister Lucy what she has to do." And there was this kind of snickering, right? And I would snicker too, and Mama would shoot her eyes around the couch. If you do that, you're out of here. And what they had told her, and what I was really trying to, in quotes, snicker about, was that they talked about putting on a pot of hot grits on the stove. Or hot water, and waking the husband up, holding it over, said, "If you hit me again, you got to go to sleep. Sometimes I would just drop it on you." And they were laughing, and I remember the laughter, whatever, said, "Oh, he'll just get up and put some clothes on and go out and get mad, but he'll come back, but he'll never hit her again." See, they didn't have psychologists. They didn't have psychiatrists. They didn't even have pastors, because I don't think taking that idea of what happened to them being beaten by the men, the pastors would really respond to, if you understand, being male themselves. So, but amongst themselves, I saw psychiatrists and psychologists telling one, "This is what you do. This is how you move on this earth. This is how, you get your husband from beating you. This is how you have some peace in the home." And I remember that for years. And I remember that Mama said, "You can hit me once, you can hit me twice, but if you hit me the third time, it's on me." And I remember I carried that with me for a long time, that if you allow someone to hit you for a third time, that's on you.
Yeah, they might not have had psychiatrists or therapists, but they had grits.
That's right. And they had each other, though.
peas.
I mean, they
had
literally
each other.
said we will go over to her, sit down and talk to her and tell her what she must do. Isn't it amazing?
Right.
Whatever, et cetera.
Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. Now, your style of poetry, you've spoken about being influenced by Langston Hughes, being influenced by Sterling Brown. Your 1971 album, Sun Lady for All Seasons, reads your poetry. It's got you reading from your various books of poetry and everything. And it brought to the masses of a very stream of consciousness spoken word style that Gil Scott and the Last Poets have been famous for, but there's so many other poets in the scene who are doing that spoken word style. So how important to you is spoken word as a form of poetry?
Well, don't get the chronology right, because many of them started doing it because we did it. The people did it on
Okay.
stage first with those black poets, right? And we
Yes.
didn't really necessarily know what we were doing, but we knew we were doing something.
Mm-hmm.
We knew at some point that we were gathering, with them, and saying to them, this is really what we really want to say. And so
Mm-hmm.
we began to experiment, and it was such a joy to be on stage with Baraka. For an example, we went to San Francisco to begin Black Studies. One of the things that they were doing is that they were bringing in a Black Studies department. So we need to get all the Black students and students of color in. Baraka and I got on stage to read some poetry. And, we're from the East Coast, we're reading fast, whatever. I'm falling out like this, what he's saying, and he's doing the same. And then people clapped, and there was a hand that went up and said, "Oh, thank you so much, Professor Sanchez." He said, "But would you do me a favor?" We said, "Oh, certainly." And they said, "Would you read that poetry again? Because you went so fast, we didn't understand what you said." Listen to that. Because that is then, the anthem of y'all coming behind with that fast,
Yes.
rapid, whatever. And so we read it again. And I remember Baraka said, "I'm going to lose the beat." But we read it again slowly. But when hip hop came, we heard it, by the way, and we
Mm-hmm.
looked up and said, "Oh my God, they're continuing, what we were doing at that fast pace, whatever."
Yeah.
So because of y'all, when y'all got up there and began to go 1, 2, 3, whatever, every place you go now, you don't have to slow down anything, because you prepared people for our coming, for our recoming, for our coming out there with our fast-paced poems that we did at some particular point. I mean, that is the joy. And when you came, we recognized you. We were, "Whoa, listen, did you hear? Yeah, did you? Well, And I remember Rock was always so incisive. He would say, "Hey, they finally picked up on what we were doing." And I hadn't even
Yeah.
thought about that. And I said, yeah, they did. I mean, that's Baraka. Nothing
Yes.
ever went past him at some
Yes.
point. And we began to say simply, "That is so. These are our children. Listen to them. These are
Yes,
our
indeed.
children."
So I was in San Juan, Puerto Rico recently, and I came across a dedication to Arturo Alfonso Schomburg, and it reminded me that Schomburg was a Puerto Rican dude, which I forgot. But I grew up going to the Schomburg Center, and so talk to me about the Schomburg Center for Research in Black Culture, Research Library in Harlem on Malcolm X Boulevard, and its impact on your life.
The big thing is that Miss Hudson would always tease me when I came in, when I brought my classes to the Schomburg. She said, "Oh, I have a great story to tell about your professor." And I stopped backing, going to the back. She said, "Well, she came in here when she was 19 and a half years of age. She'd gone downtown for a job. They told her the job was filled. She accidentally stumbled upon the Schomburg. She came in, knocked on the glass door, and said, 'What is the Schomburg? What is your name?' I told her Miss Jean Hudson. She told me her name, whatever. And I said, 'Oh, my dear,' she said, 'this library has books only by and about Negroes.' And I said, with my fresh mouth, 19 and a half year old self, I said, 'There must not be many books in here, huh?' She never let me forget that. And that's the story that she told. But that is also the woman who set me down that same day and brought me 3 books, Souls of Black Folk, Up from Slavery, and Their Eyes Are Watching God. She put Their Eyes Are Watching God on top for some reason, right? And I opened that book and started to read. Had trouble reading, it's not dialect, those of you who teach Black English, reading the Black English, although we spoke Black English. I had trouble reading on the page. When my eyes and mouth became attuned to it, I got up out of my chair, because I'm sitting with all these African-American men, scholars, right? Knocked on the glass door and said, with tears in my eyes, said, "How could I be a graduate of Hunter College in New York, going to NYU, and never discovered any of these people?" She said, "Oh, my dear, go sit down. I'm going to give you lots and lots of books." And she did. I got up again as I read some more because I began to sob. And I got up and said, no, 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 no. How could I be an educated young woman and never come across these books? She said, oh, I have lots of books for you. When I got ready to sit down, one of the African scholars said, Miss Hudson, tell this young woman either she sits still or she has to leave. And I left in the evening with them when they went home. And I went home to dinner and told my dad I couldn't find a job. And the next morning I came out to the Schomburg. I spent the whole summer in the Schomburg. So they're reading. She sent me to Mr. Michaud, and Richard with 2 black bookstores there. And they gave me, 4 bags of books. And I took them home and began my education. I began to read those books and was ready at some point to teach black literature. And you do know that I thought it was just black literature until one day there was a knock on my door with my landlord, and he said, there's these men want to see you. And the guy came in and said FBI. And I said, oh, I said, is there a problem? And he turned to my landlord and said, she's teaching Du Bois. No, he said Du Bois. She's teaching Du Bois, Garvey, Wright. He did his whole litany of names. And I was so naive and young people. I said, yes, I am teaching them. You cannot teach black literature without them. The guy looked at me like, lady, is you crazy? There I was. And I was literally attacked in a verbal way. He said to my landlord, put her out. She's one of those militants out on campus. And my landlord by then, his Japanese American brother, said, Miss Sanchez, I'll see you later. And he left. And there I was, with those people who were angry that we had resurrected people that we should have known a long time ago. Those people who would have formed us and not deformed us. Those people who would have made me understand that we had a long, long history of literature, that we were people who built things. We didn't destroy things. We were people who had always built and as opposed to destroying. And finally, I said to them, okay, that's it, and they left. But I called Miss Hudson. She'll never forget it. And I said, Miss Hudson, the FBI just left my house and they really basically threatened me. I said, I'm just teaching black literature and creative writing. She said, oh, my dear Sonia, I thought you knew that if you taught some of those people like Du Bois and Wright, you might get into a little trouble. And we got into big trouble, but it was good trouble. After I went through Souls of Black Folk, after I went through Up From Slavery, after I went through Their Eyes Are Watching God, Miss Hudson put all those other books, those books that came from overseas, those books that came from Africa, those cultural books, those books that talk about our history. And it was so important that every time I went someplace, when someone asked me to dance, I know we'd be dancing, and I said, have you read Souls of Black Folk? When I turned around, he was gone, whatever. And I realized I had to stop asking those questions while I was dancing. But what we did is that all of us, who were writing at the time, all of us who were getting on stages at the time, beginning to read in front of audiences, move that poetry from that very interesting Western arena that we had been taught, right, to an arena that said, well, what are you going to put in there if you don't use that Western arena? And we began to do research in the Schomburg. We began to have people who talked to us, scholars who talked to us, John Henry Clark, Queen Mother Moore, who all of a sudden said to me one day, reparations. I said, well, what is reparations? She said, oh, my dear Sonia. And she began to teach. But that's what we did. We always had a notebook, in our hands, in our purses, in our bags, and pens, lots of paper, whatever, because we were always taught by those scholars, by those men who were on 125th Street teaching about Africa. And they said, Africa, we went like terrible little kids. Ooh, Africa, and start laughing. And they would shoot their eyes and say, you see, they don't know. And John Henry Clark was one of the people. A bunch of other scholars were one of the people who stood up and taught. And I learned where we had to go to learn some of this stuff, to meet some of these people. The Schomburg was what I called the place that gave me all the information that I needed to know if I wanted to teach, if I wanted to write even, if I wanted to invest any time with learning, with advancement, and going to Mr. Richard Moore's and Mr. Michelle's bookstore. And they gave me 2 bags of books like that. African West Indian books and African American books. And we began the whole process of reading, taking notes, and studying. So when someone said, we're going to start Black Studies, when I came, well, we need someone to teach writing and literature. And someone said, that Sanchez woman's always talking about all this Black history and pyramids and blah, 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 and where her people came from, whatever. We should contact her. And they did. Contact me in a place called Mexico City, where I had gone, after Malcolm was assassinated. And I got there and I said to the people, where are your pyramids? And they told, I got on a bus and took an hour-long drive and climbed the pyramids there. It was only then that fresh air began to enter my nostrils and my body again. There was regrowth right there in Mexico. And I knew that I could then come back, and begin the struggle and the work again. But I had to clear not only my head. People say I need to clear my head. No, you need to clear the whole bloody body. You need to just, rinse that blood again. And I came back afresh to a place called New York City, teaching. And someone said simply, we're coming from we're starting Black Studies, Sonia. We want you to come out and teach. And we want to meet Leroy Jones, they said, and Larry Neal, because they were doing Black Fire at the time. You have no idea what it was to walk into a classroom and people heard that this thing called Black literature was being given. It was called Black literature. Can you imagine? People were sitting out in the hallway. People were sitting in people's laps. People were sitting on the curves of blackboards. It was so crowded that, for a moment, I didn't know why they were all there. But I wrote my name on the board, and then I wrote on the board that went around the room the names of all the people that I knew. They only knew 2 people, Martin Luther King and Malcolm X. But what it did, my dear brother, it saved my life. It saved a lot of people's lives. It made us understand at some point there was something more. We had to teach writing that also responded to who they were. Not writing that you could not tell who was writing the book at all. Because you always understood when other people wrote books, you understood exactly who was writing. We understood their culture. I said, people have got to know who's writing these books and what these books are all about. And there we were at the beginning, actually, I want to say of a new century, of a new time, of a time that you literally began to invest in a future. Last story on that, in California, we were invited to come to a center to read, and there were like 4 rows of young Black men, and we were up on the stage, Askia Muhammad, Marvin X, Baraka, Sarah Fabio, and myself. And someone said in the front seat, what they doing up there on stage? I don't know. Other person said, they're reading poetry. Oh, I thought they were going to sing. And the whole first row got up and left. Right.
Wow.
But we kept going. 1 year later, at that place in San Francisco where all the bands go.
Fillmore?
Fillmore.
I knew you knew it, Talib.
A year later at the Fillmore. You know how big that place is?
Yes.
The only people who were there was just the people I named. That's all.
Wow.
Reading poetry. That place, people were hanging over the rafters,
Wow.
whatever. And as we read, I read right before Baraka. When Baraka finished, the people went crazy. And we looked at each other. We hugged each other. We knew we had it.
Shout out to our good friend of the show, Jessica Care Moore. She would like for us to ask you, what do you think the role of a Black poet is in 2022?
Hi, my dear sister. If you're listening, I know you're listening.
Oh, she's
it hasn't
listening.
changed. Tell us the same that it has always been. That is to tell the truth. To show beauty, to show the beauty of the people you're writing about. To effect change, to say that there is hope always, but above all, to show love and respect for your people. And then an extension of all people. There's no magical wand on this one. We learn from Sterling Brown, the people who came before. We learn from Margaret Walker when she did that most important poem, For My People. For my people
Yes.
everywhere. That's what we knew and understood. For that whole group of people who had written before us. We knew that we were a continuation. So I did a long essay from the Harlem Renaissance to the Black Arts Movement to Talib and his group of people, because we knew that that connection was there,
Right.
and no one had mentioned that connection, but we knew it was there, and we knew that, that each one has given birth to the other. And, and it means that when I'm down in Washington, D.C., this sister, really losing it, getting down and grinding in front of this guy, and he called her, and afterwards, a hoe, and I said gently, we should be careful the names we give people, if we know that's to be true, we always need to extend ourselves and say, that's not what we need to do, and he said it again out loud, right? And it was a huge crowd. And I just said, your mama,
Take it back.
But afterwards, what people didn't record is I went over to him and I just said, my brother, don't disrespect black women, any women
That's right.
at all, I said. And I hugged him, and said, but, I am from the 60s, right? And if someone, is acting out, be careful, because we have quick mouths. We learn how to respond quick. I know you don't want your mama to be called that, so we shouldn't call any sister, who thought that that's how she was going to get something, or, whatever, by opening up everything, and, quite often my generation, we would go up and help the child up off the floor and not curse her at all, but just to show, or condemn, right? Just to show we love you, sister. That's why we're picking you up off the floor. Gyrate to freedom.
Listen, that's the best. What's the song that you have, Talib?
Make it classy.
Yes, make it classy.
I took a song.
That's what
I took a
that's
song.
for.
It was a song by Tiger called "Make It Nasty," and I made a version called "Make It Classy."
Yeah, don't make it nasty.
Make it classy.
And I said, I'm not a rude person, my brother, but we really have to have respect for everybody.
All women. Yep.
That's
That
right.
we have not all been raised the same way, right? And at some point when people don't know any better, at some point you go and pick them up and have a conversation, that what do we use this body for? What is this body? What is it here for? But above all, what does it mean to be a black woman? And why are we always, shown to be like, ooh, come get this, baby, whatever. But the point is simply, we are more than that. And you are
Yes.
talking about women, who have been, at the top of civilization, women who knew medicine, women who knew language, women who knew beauty, women who knew, what to do and how to look and how to raise and how to cook and how to be. And these women were a part of my grandmother.
Sister Sonia Sanchez, we love and appreciate you so much. Thank you for coming on our show. I was wondering if before you went, if you had any pieces that you would like to share for our audience.
This is a piece that I did for my dear brother Max Roach. And we did it with music, and also sometimes I do it with a little sound. Nothing ends. Every blade of grass, remembering your sound. Your sounds exploding in the universe return to earth in prayer. As you drum, your hands kept reaching for God, 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 God. The morning sky so lovely imitates your laughter. You came warrior clear, your music kissing our spines, feet tapping, singing, impeach our blood. You came drumming sweet life on sails of flesh. Your fast beat, riding the air settles in our bones. Your drums soloing our breaths into the beat unbeat. Your hands shimmering on the legs of rain. Your hands shimmering on the legs of rain. If you Google Max Roach, you'll see that on his tombstone, the last haiku, your hands shimmering on the legs of rain. And what an honor. They asked me if they could put it on there,
Wow.
Yes.
And that is the joy. And usually I do more of the music and the drum beat. I wasn't sure about your time, so I didn't want to mess with your
No, we
time.
listen. We have no fear of time here. What you just did, thank you for sharing that with us. Rest in peace to Guru from Gangstar. He had a song on the Mo Better Blues soundtrack with DJ Premier called Jazz Thing, and what you just did reminded me of that song. And he had a lyric. He was like, Max Roach, cymbals talking, bass drum talking, snare drum rocking. So thank you for sharing that with us. Your book of poetry, collected poems, is available now. There we go. Everywhere at my store in Kiru Books online. You can come get a copy of this book.
Right.
We are honored and so proud to have you, and thank you so much for blessing us with your time, sister. Thank you so much.
Could I end with a haiku that I did for my children
please.
when I was in China, and I missed them so very much. And I wrote this haiku: "Let me wear the day well, so when it reaches you, you will enjoy it." I was on a Monday going to visit the Great Wall of China, and my children on a Sunday with my Aunt Sarah. And I said to the children, "It is Monday." And they said to Aunt Sarah, "Mommy doesn't know, but it's Sunday, isn't it, Aunt Sarah?" And she said, "Yes." But I was greeting the day before my children greeted the day. And I had to promise to wear it well. So by the time they got it, they would be obliged to wear it well. And that's the joy and the brilliance, and the philosophy of the haiku, nothing terrible ever written, but always the connection of the body, to the body of earth that exists also too, because without one or the other, we don't exist at all on this earth. So let me wear the day well, so when it reaches you, you will enjoy it.
I love that.
Brilliant,
Wow.
beautiful, powerful, excellent. Ladies and
Thank you,
gentlemen,
my
the
dear
People's
brother.
Party is proud to have Sonia Sanchez. Thank you so
Thank
much.
you. Love to you. Thank
Thank
you.
you, sis.
Thank you, my dear sister.
Thank you so much.
I love you so much.